And with that, we are live. Hello and welcome. Wednesday, time for Light 'em Up, time for the Light 'em Up Lounge. And today we have a little celebration in stall. We want to celebrate 30 years of Tor Imports. We want to celebrate cigar community, cigar culture, cigar history. And I am delighted and honored to welcome two gentlemen with us tonight, live from the Tor Imports aging room. And we'll learn a little more about that in just a moment. But it is my pleasure and privilege to have Scott Wines and Ricardo Carioni with me here tonight. I would love to welcome Scott and Ricardo, and I would love to welcome all of you joining us here today, be it at the lounge, be it via Facebook on our live stream. To all of you, if you have any questions, and I'm sure you have plenty for these distinguished gentlemen, then please make yourselves heard here at the lounge or post your comments underneath the live stream over on Facebook. I'm checking, I'm watching, I'll forward your questions to our treasured guests of honor. And so without further ado, the stage is yours. Scott, Ricardo, thanks for joining us. Thanks for being with me at the Light 'em Up Lounge.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Reinhard, and good evening and welcome to everyone, and thank you for giving up your Wednesday night, wherever you are in the world. We're very humbled that we were given this opportunity to spend an evening with you all, and I hope that we all enjoy ourselves. That's the aim. So I'm Scott, and this is Ricardo.
Thank you very much, Scott, and indeed I echo Scott's sentiment and big warm welcome all the way here from Devon, and we're filled with gratitude to each and every one of you for joining us today, and to you, our dear Reinhard. You know how much appreciation and admiration for the work that you've done over years now, creating this space to come and communicate and engage virtually. Recall a couple of years ago when things were really difficult and COVID was there and we couldn't get out. This gave a lot of us an opportunity to go and connect with the community. So thank you for this opportunity, and we look forward to a fantastic evening.
Well, I have to thank you, and interestingly enough, Ricardo and Scott, you both are regulars here at the lounge. We had the pleasure of hosting you on panels. We had the pleasure, Ricardo, in your previous position as Deputy Ambassador for Nicaragua in the United Kingdom, to share the Puro Sabor virtual festival. So we've been through quite a few things together, and what an incredible 3 years indeed. Time flies, and I don't know if it's just me getting older or if we get sensitive to those kind of things with age, but time's flying, and it's unbelievable that we're getting close to the holiday season already, and we'll wrap up another year of Light 'em Up.
Yeah, we call these the Zoom years, Reinhard. Rather than the COVID years, it's the Zoom years where the whole world changed, and I think people had the opportunity to meet the maker and ask them questions without having to fly them all over the world for a one night where they'd spend an hour or 2 hours with a group of 20 to 30 people. I think what Zoom has done, and what you have done in particular, is opened up a forum where people can engage with the manufacturers, the retailers, the importers, consumers, people involved in the industry, to basically ask them any questions. And it's unbelievable. And I think from that, the whole world of cigars has escalated because of the knowledge and the fact that we have this access. It's absolutely incredible.
Indeed. I mean, and I was saying 2 years, a couple of years, like it's 3 years already. And I still recall the first Christmas, and then came the second Christmas special. And now we're coming to the third one. But I do have to say that indeed, for the first sort of year and a half that I was attending this show in a previous role. That to me was really instrumental to learn in such a small period of time a lot directly from the cigar makers. And that was a unique opportunity that previously I will get an opportunity every once in a while when Tor Imports and Scott will bring some cigar makers and the embassy will, go and try to support a little bit from our end. I had the privilege to go and meet. I remember the very first event I joined in after a little while, Juan Martinez was in town. So seeing Joya de Nicaragua and Juan in person was a great honor and a great way to learn. There's nothing better. And I think that's one of the unique elements of our cigars from our part of the world in many ways, that you actually have the masterminds, you have the creators of these brands, the families that originated, that had the dream, that then were able to create the products that we enjoy today. And to have a chance to touch that, to drink from that well of knowledge, it's unparalleled and there's nothing like it. And you created indeed a platform, an avenue to be able to get a little bit of that sap out from my little apartment in London, freezing sometimes. So it's beautiful to have seen it both from outside the industry and now from inside the industry for the last year and a half, almost basically. So yeah, no, big congratulations. And it's great to see always some of these familiar faces. You also create a bond, not only with the cigar makers, but you create this bond then with the other Zoomers and the other light 'em uppers that come to this one. So it's been a very special ride altogether.
I think what's amazing, Reinhard, is when we do our live physical events now around the country, people who you haven't met in real life come up now. Hey, Scott, do you remember that night? And I'm thinking, who the hell are you? Because you only see a little face. I mean, people must think I'm about 6'5", but those that know me know that I'm not 6'5". And it's really incredible because all you know is people's heads and the amount of engagement. Do you remember that night we did this? And you remember that night you did that? And it's like, wow. So you've created this like virtual friend that you meet then at a live physical event, and the relationship carries on. It's really incredible. It really is.
Yeah. For a long time, I think the southern line, when you were meeting people, was, oh, we stopped being floating heads. And you're like, oh, you were that square top right on that evening. So that's the kind of way your eyes become tiny little squares. But it's amazing how this industry, again, despite the challenges that the terrible situation with COVID created and presented to many of us and to, millions of people around the world, there's a slight silver lining in the sense that it gave us a way of connecting with each other. There's a will, there's a way. And I think as cigar brothers and sisters of the leaves, or whatever you want to call it, I think people that appreciate the art and the heritage or the tradition of cigars and the cultures behind them find a way to connect and share this love, this passion, and this knowledge. So no, it's been brilliant.
I think that's exactly it. And it's a true testament that despite these 3 years, and normally wherever I go now, when I meet people who I met before COVID for the last time, and then you feel like it was almost like yesterday, but then there's this gap of like 3 years that are, as you would have crossed them out of your calendar entirely. But the resilience and the strength and connection in the cigar world is magnificent. And what we share here and many other platforms, what you have done so successfully with your virtual events, that is a true testament to how special and, I dare say, unique the premium cigar industry is, in particular for the quality of people therein. And again, I can only thank you, and I'm humbled by your warm words. But we're here to celebrate Tor and celebrate your 30th anniversary and your accomplishments. But I would love to piggyback on what you said and use that as a segue, because Ricardo, you mentioned your previous position, and Scott, you've been in this business for such a long time. How do you both feel now, working together as the dynamic duo of Tor Imports, with your various different backgrounds, with everything that you bring to the table as a Scotsman, as a true Nicaraguan at heart, with that fire and energy and drive? Have you ever envisioned working in the cigar industry in the first place?
Well, somebody's asking the question or making the statement, knows who Robin is. Yeah. You may be wrong. I refer to us as the film Twins with Arnold Schwarzenegger and Danny DeVito. One of us is over 6 foot and one of us isn't. So you can work it out. I've only been involved in the cigar industry for, I'm the custodian of Tor. I took on the business in 2012. I was involved in it for a couple of years before that. So the business started in 1992 with a husband and wife team, Mark and Sandra Acton, in a little fishing town in Devon, Dawlish, which is famous for having black swans, would you know, as well as Tor. So I've only been in the cigar industry quite a short period of time, probably only about 14 years, but I've been in the tobacco industry for 38, which is longer than some of you have probably been alive. So I come from corporate big tobacco, and to move from corporate big tobacco to family tobacco is a hell of a culture change and a hell of a culture shock, because they are wide apart and they're not even, in my opinion, the same industry. But what big tobacco taught me was all the things I needed to know on how to run a business. And I love tobacco. It's just that I didn't have a great knowledge of cigars, how they're made, or anything about them, to be honest. And I can remember going to the first IPCPR shows in America, and I took somebody with me who was an expert because I was terrified I was going to get asked technical questions. I enjoyed cigars and I was a hobbyist, but I wasn't in any way, shape or form an expert, nor did I ever imagine that I would get involved in this industry. But I'm so glad I did. It's a very unique industry to be in. It's a very family-orientated industry, from the maker to the importer to the retailer to the consumer, all the way through. It's a handmade product, and it's one of the very few products I can think of, other than maybe carpentry. There might be others, where everything starts with a tiny little seed and works its way all the way through to the end user, except you can't smoke a chair. Although there are maybe some cigars out there that are equivalent of. Ricardo and I met in 2016, 17, 16?
Yes, 16, I think. Yeah.
And it was through work we did with the Nicaraguan embassy in the UK, where we were trying to break into the market properly. And we had a trade Nicaraguan event in Birmingham, and unknown to me, the ambassador came to the event to present Nicaragua to the English and Scottish retailers that came along. But unknown to me, the work behind the scenes to all the presentation was done by Ricardo. And it was after that we met. When you can pick up the story.
Yeah. No, I mean, it was incredible, because I was back there in Singapore, I remember, and I had just taken officially on the role. I was still staying for a couple of months in Singapore because I was moving my family back to the UK. And the ambassador reached out, and the embassy reached out and said, look, we need to do a research on the cigar industry in Nicaragua, and would like you to take on this task. And it's a presentation the ambassador is going to bring into a cigar importer, Tor Imports. I said, okay, fine. So interesting enough for me, and I'll do a little segue and come back, and I'll pick it up here on this point. And I was having this conversation on a show recently with Carlito Fuente, and we had Jeremiah and Jose Blanco. And I think for me, whilst it's been a year and a half almost full-time working in this industry, I think when you come from my part of the world, in a way, cigars and that culture is in your DNA. It's there. Whether you get a chance in life to be able to ignite and get that DNA to transform and become something that you either become a passion, you become a hobby, or you becomes part of your life as a job, conditions will appear that allow you to do that. in my case, I used to think you either had to be born into the industry or you had to have a bunch of money somehow to be able to work your way into the industry, or just sometimes with some level of perseverance, openness to learn, and sometimes the stars align in a certain way with a little bit of a Scottish wind. And when that happens, then opportunities appear. So indeed, it started with the research, and that in 2016 is when I realized, because I used to smoke cigars. I mean, I remember the first cigars that I smoked, and I was it was a nice hobby that I had, but nothing serious. And it was through that research that I realized, and I had a moment of boom, my brain exploded when I realized what was happening in Nicaragua, particularly in this case, because the research was on Nicaragua, and what the cigar industry had done for my country and how it was evolving so positively. So it got me really, really excited. Who would have thought that, by the time I was ending my post at the embassy, and I was provided with an opportunity to either, move to Brussels as an ambassador of Nicaragua there, or I turned 40 years old that year. And I had this moment in life when you think what you really value and what you really, really want to do. And I felt really passionate. I can tell you many things I like about my wife, but I can tell you exactly why I ended up marrying her. Same with cigars and the culture. There's so many things about them, but I think once it grabs you, and in my case, the DNA woke up, that heritage from my forefathers from Nicaragua came back to life. And Scott gave me an opportunity that I thought I could only dream of, to join the industry, which what I think is the best company I could have wished for. And having been able to have an opportunity to develop a working relationship at the embassy. So we weren't strangers to each other. We knew each other's essence in many ways, which ultimately you learn to trust people. And once you have that trust and you get to know someone, then you know what you can work with. I think the rest, skills and experience and so on, they're things that you add in life. But once you get the core of an individual, that's when you know if that's going to be someone you wish to partner or not. So in my case, I was very honored to have had that opportunity, and I haven't let it go. And I'm still learning every single day from Scott and from you and everyone in the industry.
Ricardo, one brief question for you as a follow-up there. Being in the industry full time now, what has changed for you? And did it take away some of the passion that you had previously? Did it purely add to it? In terms of your overall perspective, with a different angle and a different view now at the industry?
No, great question. Most people now that see me, they say like, wow, you look more relaxed and more fulfilled and happier than you've ever been. Yes, we're working like crazy, but I enjoy it. I'm used to working like, at good amount of workload and working smart but hard. But I love it. So the more I get to learn, the more I enjoy it, the more I realize the challenges, I think that give us fuel. Whenever I see something unfair about the way our industry is being treated, when I see something unfair, or when I see a lack of understanding or a lack of education about something related to our industry or my own country, my own culture, it just fuels me and gives me more fire to go for it. So I can genuinely say that it's, if anything, the more onion layers I peel off the onion, the more I fall in love with it, and the more I give my whole to it. I think it's one of those things in life. If you're fortunate enough to find a passion and you're able to dedicate your life to that passion, my dad used to tell me this, I remember growing up, it's one of the biggest blessings in life. And that's how it feels. So when you compare to the previous role, now I really feel fulfilled. It was a great honor to serve my country as in my diplomatic capacity. That's something that I will never forget and will always treasure for everything that he gave me. And in many ways brought me to meet Scott and got me involved into the industry. So it was all kind of maybe part of a path that I feel was leading to where I am right now. It's been a very short period of time, long way to go to get to 14 and then hopefully 38 and so on and so much more. But I can tell you, I think you've seen me, the energy and the happiness that I have from being part of this is it's like a little kid coming into, the Willy Wonka chocolate factory. That's my chocolate factory back there in a photo. And this is as happy as I've been professionally ever. I can tell you that quite genuinely.
Gosh.
That's fantastic.
Ooh,
I
Yeah.
mean it.
Scott, what makes Tor Imports special in that regards, and why do you think it had such a gravitating energy to not only pull Ricardo in, but truly to win over the UK cigar loving community? And if I just may add a little piece of context here, I mean, for all our viewers, usually we welcome cigar manufacturers, blend owners, blenders. Yet here we are today, and we're talking with the most successful or important, or however you want to call it, importer and distributor of cigars into the United Kingdom, which traditionally is one of the leading cigar countries in terms of culture and appreciation and awareness. So I think this is very important. And Ricardo, it also brings me back to the question I asked you earlier about the behind the scenes perspective of the industry, because as an enthusiast, as a hobbyist, as an aficionado, it's probably a lot different from when you actually see the industry from behind the scenes. And your role as a distributor and importer is primarily behind the scenes, even though you also actively face the consumer. But Scott, that's why I'm asking, like, how is Tor different? Why is it so successful, and why do you feel it has truly gone on that path of success in the UK and with the cigar loving community there?
I would say we're a 30-year overnight success. Yeah. It wasn't always the case, believe me. One of the reasons I took the business over was it wasn't doing particularly well, and there was big decisions that had to be made. And I think there's a few things we did, and it was basically roll up our sleeves and work damn hard. 10 years ago, we had 7 staff. We're now up to 16, which makes me very proud, incredibly proud. And I remember in those days, we had our sales guy, Jerry, who anyone who's been to London will know Jerry, who does a fantastic job. And he's actually been with Tor 25 years of the 30. So he's been loyal through the changes and the hard times. And then I'm based in Devon, which is in the southwest of England, and I covered the rest of the country from my car. So I would travel out on a Monday to Friday, traveling all over the UK, Manchester, Liverpool, Newcastle, Glasgow, Monday to Friday, calling on shops. And then at the weekend, do the stuff that you have to do to run a business. And people don't see that side of it. But then it got me thinking about how I spend my evenings, because we weren't rich in those days. Well, not rich in these days, but we certainly weren't rich in those days. So it's a case of how do we spend our evenings? Stay in a hotel or start organizing consumer events with the retailers. So that's what we did. So we probably started the process of working with retailers to start hosting events. I can remember doing them in Carlisle with like 2 people turning up. I can remember going to Birmingham, nobody turned up, and so on. But we persevered, and the next time there were 6 people at Carlisle, there was 16 people, there was 24. And we started to build a following just by rolling up the sleeves, basically, working our arses off during the day, but then working again in the evenings to try and build up a momentum behind our brands. And I guess the moment that really, it's an interesting debate about New World cigars. In those days, there wasn't the presence of New World cigars, as we call them, in the UK. There was a little bit of Fuente, there was a little bit of Padron, a little bit of Oliva, and there was a brand called Sheraton. And other than that, there was really nothing. The walls in the humidors were built on Cuba. So going in to see retailers in those, even 10 years ago, it was a case of it had to be Cuban. And if it wasn't from Cuba, it had to be cheap. That was the mental attitude that we started from, and that was 10 years ago. So we came up with this brainwave to take the wine analogy of New World wine. You know, French was the dominant country for many, many years, but Australia, New Zealand, Chile, whatever, rebranded under New World wine. I'm from Scotland. You don't say Scotch whiskey and non-Scotch whiskey, so you don't say Cuban and non-Cuban. And as a Nicaraguan sitting next to me, if you say, non, it doesn't start very well. So we created the trademark, and we own the trademark for New World cigars. And it was only when I went to renew it earlier this year, this is a true story, I actually realized we'd actually got the authorization for it on my son's birthday way back 10 years ago. And I thought that was a really weird moment looking at the document, like shit. So that's a true story. So we created New World Cigars as a concept because individually the brands in the UK were all very weak and no one had heard of them. No one was really reading the Cigar Aficionado. The Cigar Journal didn't have the presence it has now. We basically put the brands together under one umbrella to make them stronger. And from that, we added brands, but slowly, that we could manage and we could do well for them. The role of an importer and distributor is very, very simple. We add value to the manufacturer and we add value to the retailer. It's as simple as that. We don't do that for the manufacturer, they get rid of us. If we don't do it for the retailer, they don't stock our brands. So we keep things very, very simple in Tor. And somebody's asked a question. One of my proudest moments was when AJ Fernandez asked me for permission to sell New World cigars in the UK, to use his trademark on his cigars. I should have charged him a lot of money, but the deal was we had to distribute on his behalf, so we do. So that's kind of where it kind of changed, and we gathered momentum. And I think the one thing I'm very proud of in Tor, I think, is the culture. We work well with the manufacturers. We're transparent. We don't try to overpromise. We try to be very open. We share our pricing models. We do, we're very, very open with them. And I think from that we get respect. And I think from that, they like what we do because we're straight. And I think the retail trade feel very similar. We've been awarded Supplier of the Year a couple of times when they gave out awards, which we was very proud because we came from nowhere. And that's voted by the cigar retailers in the UK. So that kind of made me think we've reached the moment where we've broken the Cuban barrier. And I think what's happened in the last few years, particularly the Zoom years, is people are becoming better educated, more people are becoming interested, and more people are experimenting with cigars. They may not be ours. It honestly doesn't matter, as long as people experiment. But that's a kind of long answer to your question, Reinhard, whether that's answered your question or not. But I'd like to think we have a good culture in our business. We have people who look after each other. That's really important. And we try to make it an environment where people actually come to work and enjoy what they do, rather than it's just a job.
And if I may, I think and in many ways, Scott's answer sort of encapsulates what I think it's a trade, and one of what attracted me the most since the very beginning. And I think there's a humbleness behind it. That's something that not everyone in this industry have. Some people have more than others, and in any industry and around the world and cultures. But being humble enough to complement it with an element of honesty that I hadn't seen, particularly when I was coming from the diplomatic sector, right? You almost become very defensive with people, because in many ways, as a deputy ambassador, you were almost kind of the bridge between people wanting to meet our president, or people wanting to invest in my country or get something out of it. So for years, I started building up almost like a antibodies to repel any kind of people coming across to us. But after a while, I realized that what I saw and what you see when you meet Scott is what you get. And it is a reflection, an embodiment of the whole company, of the culture that has been instilled in Tor, is humble people, hardworking people, very honest people. And it might must add, in addition to it, I think there's an element of being humble and honest makes you look at what you have as your resources and be organized in your planning. And I think in this industry, when I have my background in technology for big corporations before being a diplomat, and there's a lot of organization and a lot of planning involved, very detailed and very organized, which in the cigar industry is evolving. It's not at the same level as in the technology sector, in other industries. But seeing what we do with the limited resources that we have at Tor, and I was really impressed with the level of planning and organization, which perhaps in many ways could be a little bit of that Scottish in you. I mean, if we think, who were the first ones thinking of saving money for a pension in the future? The Scots. So they are the ones that in many ways thought of things planning ahead, always being earlier, always being on time, plan, organize, deliver, with a level of humbleness and honesty, again, that it was so refreshing for me. And in many ways, going to your question, and people ask me this question, say, Ricardo, look, must be incredibly different. You were a diplomat, now when you're in the cigar industry, very different, right? And, you know, in many ways, there are significant differences, right? I mean, there's no heavy political element to an extent, or some of the benefits potentially that we used to have as diplomats are gone, but that's far surpassed what I get now. But the reality is, it's not that different in a way. Before, I used to have to explain to people and tell them what is Nicaragua. Most people around the world, believe it or not, they have no idea. Some people will ask me, what do you do with that? Do you eat that? Is that like an ingredient? Is that a cocktail? What do you do with the Nicaragua? So having that kind of lack of understanding or misunderstanding, information that perhaps is very biased, the same way people might try to put our hand premium cigar industry within the whole tobacco cigarettes as well. So that drive to put things right, to educate, to try to defend, to try to nurture something that you value very much, is not that different to what I used to do before. We used to practice in Nicaragua small state diplomacy, tiny little country. You're never going to go and fight the big guys through force. You always have to find ways, or whenever there's a little bit of a space, you push and you drive through it, or you have to be very pragmatic and be humble and find ways to, through creating alliances, through working with each other, to be able to achieve the results that you want. So it's not like we come in and boom, we drive the new world cigar truck and everything opens doors. No. It's one mouth, one cigar at a time. Till today, I still get the, what? Cigars from what? You mean those non-Cubans? No, yeah. Hold on. There's something else behind it. So in many ways, a lot of similarities, a lot of parallels. But I go back to that. I think what it was really refreshing is to meet people who, and I remember Scott told me this at the beginning. He said, Ricardo, your word is your currency in this industry. And I've always kept that. I never forget about that, because everything we say and we do, that's our track record. It's almost like an open ledger that's out there. And I think the respect that Tor Imports have earned, not only because of their planning, their humbleness, their honesty, is that ability that people shake a hand with us and they know what we say we will deliver. There's no two ways about it.
Very well put. Wonderful words indeed that you share with us. Speaking of the planning aspect and the intricacies of the industry, and how it in certain ways has this very charming and at the same time somewhat challenging connotations to it, when you still feel that certain manufacturers and retailers will probably fax each other, and then here we are facing the realities of 2022. But that's what we all love about the industry as well, right? It's that very charming, old school, traditional aspect of craftsmanship, honesty, handshake mentality, and how we come together. I mean, that's magnificent. The international markets probably function slightly differently than the US market. And what we currently see is a dramatic shift, particularly in the international markets, with the Cuban dominance slowly not fading away, but at least coming down from a very high level to probably a more reasonable split of 60-40, maybe 50-50 in the near future. All of that is to be seen and to be discussed. The point I want to make, though, is in the US, the game for a lot of manufacturers is rather easy. You ship your cigars directly from the manufacturing country. Most manufacturers will probably have their own distribution company or daughter company there. Whereas in the international markets, your role as an importer and distributor is vital. It's vitally important for the success of those brands. And since we have people joining us from all over the world, whether it's Asia, the Middle East, Africa, Europe, but also the US, Scott, maybe you want to talk a little bit about the important role that you have there and how you help develop, nurture that plant of the New World cigars in the international markets.
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting question, because obviously in America they don't have Cuban cigars legally anyway. So for us, it's a case of we take our time to make sure we're working with the right partner, and we get approached by many companies and many brand owners on a weekly basis. Hey, I've got the best cigar in the world. I've got the best cigar in the world. You know, if I had £1 for every person who's approached us to say they've got the best cigar in the world, no one's ever, hey, I've got a shit cigar. So we get approached a lot. But what we do is we take our time to do our research, do our due diligence to see who these people are. You know, the big guys, you know who they are, and you know, but the smaller companies, it's good we take our time to do our research. But it's not just about the cigar and the brand, it's about the people behind the brand. And what kind of people are they? And that means a lot to us in Tor, that we know we're working with people and businesses who give something back and look after the staff and have the kind of ethics that we have. So we have a kind of checklist. Anybody who's looked at our website, they'll see we have a About Us page, which kind of literally explains about, we're looking at gender policy, pay policy, what kind of medical supplies do they give to their staff. We look at all of that because that's actually very important, because as Ricardo quite rightly says, we build brands, or help manufacturers build their brands step by step. What we're not interested in is guys who are here today, gone tomorrow. So we want to work with partners who have taken their time to build their brands. And we always say to them, we might not be your right partner. You do your due diligence on us, because it's a two-way street. They've got to find out more about us. So it's a bit like the flirting process with a young lady, where you meet and you have the chat up and all the rest of it. It's not like in Glasgow, you just say you're dancing and that's it, you're over, you're in. We take our time to romance and find out about the partner before we take any brand on, to make sure we're comfortable and they're comfortable, that it's not just going to be a wee fling and then we part. But when we take a brand on, we work with the manufacturer to determine. The UK humidors are like, I always say to them, think of a red telephone box in London. There are exceptions to that, but many of the humidors in the UK are the size of a red telephone box. And if you think that over 50 or 60% of that will be filled with, Cohibas and Romeo and Julietas from Cuba, there isn't a lot of space left to play with. So when we sit down with the manufacturer, we work with them to prepare a plan, not just for the first year, but to say, how are we going to launch? How can you support us? What can we do to support you? And then we basically go to launch at an agreed period with an agreed plan. But we also know what the next phases are going to be, probably right through to maybe 15, 18 months, so that we can plan ahead, particularly with the lead times for manufacturer being so long at the moment. It means that we have to plan really carefully what we do for the manufacturers, we effectively become their trade marketing arm. So we do everything that they would do themselves in America. We would sell the product in, we would merchandise, we would host events, we'd help retailers with their online offering in terms of brand awareness. We also take care of all the legislation issues in the UK. We don't ask the manufacturers to get involved unless we need guidance or some papers that they may have submitted in America or other countries. We work closely with the PCA. We're members of the PCA in America. Ricardo sat on the last international seminar with that. So we basically become them in everything but name. And it's a true partnership. And as I said, earlier, it's very, very straightforward. In my country, you do a deal on a handshake. And if we're not good enough, they kick us out. And it's as simple as that. That gives us a lot of motivation to do well because we don't want to fail on their behalf and we don't want to fail on our behalf. So that's effectively what we do. So we are the manufacturer in our country, but without using their name, we do everything that they would do with their support and their approval.
If I must say, it's a huge responsibility. We take this, again, you are the representative, you are the voice, you are the face, you bring in the product. So you, in that moment, you are the embodiment of the brand to the eyes, not only of the trade, but also to the consumers. So that's a very big responsibility that we do not take lightly and that we actually thrive on and we love it, because I think it's something that really gives you the challenge to really deeply learn about the brand, about the product, and be able to convey then that knowledge and that passion and really get people excited and knowledgeable of those brands. So that's one of the most beautiful parts of the process. And as Scott said, look, like a great cigar, we don't rush things. Things that get rushed, when it comes into a rush cigar, we know what happens in the end. That's not going to be an enjoyable experience usually. Same happens when it comes into becoming coming with an importation, distribution, and starting to work with a company. If we rush things, I think those will have been the few times that things might not have gone to the level that we would have expected. So we've learned from these lessons, and we don't rush things. We don't rush the hands of time. Things need to take their time, and we follow through. It's something really, really unique to the way we do that. And I think that formula has worked. You mentioned something interesting. I feel that, yes, in many ways, there's an element of the industry that I would never dare to change, right, or tinker with when it comes into the artisanal element of the creation of the product itself. That's something that, you can only enhance certain elements about it into minor ways around the edges, but not the core essence. That knowledge is almost sacred, and it's something that you pass from generation to generation, and then you create these fantastic cigars. But I think on the other side of it, when it comes into the distribution, perhaps the logistics, when it comes into the way legislation and lobbying goes on, those I do things, there's space there for us to keep developing and keep improving and keep bringing more technology, bringing in more advanced models to be applied. So it's exciting because it's not an static, it's not a museum in that sense. There's so much that we need to improve. And for me, it has been refreshing because I come from a very different background, different industries, and you compare to the way things happen, I don't know, in the gaming industry or in the travel industry or in the diplomatic industry to an extent. It's great to see the opportunities to change. But what I've learned in this year and a half is that you have to do it with the right cadence. You can't rush things, even if you think there might be a better way. And you know that this works very well in other industries, be it logistics, be it the way the packaging, be in the warehousing, whatever it might be. Things need to be done in a certain way with a level of planning and understanding that it's an evolution. It's not a revolution. I think revolutions are good for certain things, but when it comes into organized distribution of a product where people's livelihoods are at stake, you need to be pragmatic, respectful, and take your time. But we are seeing changes, and I can see that there's a bright future, I feel, well, at least I'm cautiously optimistic about it, into ways that we can keep improving our part of our job within the chain of the cigar industry.
Very true. Now, obviously, you're operating in a rather particular environment, with the UK being such a such a discerning market for premium cigars with such a long-lasting tradition and history. Our dear friend Philip Wynn from Felipe Gregorio Cigars, who's watching us on Facebook, and I'm sending my very best greetings to Philip. He was asking for the past and the common denominator for the English consumer being EMS, the English market selection. And he was curious if that is still valid, or if the market taste and the consumer behavior in the UK is shifting. And I would like to add to that. Can you probably elaborate a little bit on how the UK cigar scene is different and rather unique in that sense?
First of all, EMS in my part of the world is the Edinburgh market selection. Yeah. And the Scots, the Welsh, and the Irish might have something to say about that anyway. Yeah, I think we treat the UK as a distributor. There's 4 countries, but there's different legislation in each country, so it is a little bit confusing, and we won't go into Northern Ireland and Brexit. That's a pain that we can handle. But as a marketplace, there's really 2 markets. There's London and there's the rest of the UK. London is a very different marketplace to the rest of the UK. So there's a good guy on the Zoom room today called Ray Prodanoff in Leeds with the hat. Yeah? Now, if you go into Ray's store in Leeds, his presence for New World cigars is probably 75% of the display area and 25% Cuban. That's unique, but it's happening. So 10 years ago, outside of London, you would get 90% Cuban shelf space and 10% what they called non-Cuban. But we're starting to see 50-50 in more and more retail stores, with the exception of Ray, who's kind of leading the way as a New World guru in Leeds to promote the New World concept. So outside of London, the market is really shifting fast. Inside of London, a lot of the golden mile of cigars, the catwalk of the international cigar arena, where you've got the Davidoff, the JJ Fox, the Cigars, and the Havana Exchange, and around the Westminster and Mayfair areas, you're still seeing the dominance of the Cuban marketplace, the Cuban brand. And that's historic, but also because of the visitors that they get in London. So people coming from, all over the world who want to go into one of these very famous and fine shops and smoke a Cuban cigar. But you walk down there today, the shelf space that we've got, for example, is getting wider and wider and wider in those shops. So it's changing. But we say London's the last sort of bastion of Cuba. It really is. Cuba's still the dominant region in that location, but outside of London, it really is changing. And I did a thing. I was kindly invited by Mitchell Orchin of Cigars a few weeks ago to share an interview with him. And Mitchell's the biggest operator in the UK, and his sales across the whole of the UK are now split 60-40 in favour of Cuba. But as we agreed 10 years ago, it was probably 95-5. So the wind is changing. And, it'll change at the right pace, because if it changes too fast, we start having the same problems of out of stocks and unavailabilities and stuff like that. So the pace it's changing at is a good pace that we can manage. And I can only see that percentage continuing. I can only see the growth coming in the future. Otherwise, I wouldn't be sitting here. Yeah.
And I think to complement that, then on the other side of your question, perhaps in terms of the culture, and particularly as a foreigner, perhaps it's easier for me to sometimes to see. I've had the fortune in many ways to leave, not only visit, but actually live in several countries and actually experience the cigar culture as a person living in that country, still being a foreigner in those countries. and it's unique, without a doubt. I think that the British as a whole, if you go back in time, right, and you go at the very beginnings, whilst the Spaniards were the first ones where our forefathers in Latin America gave them the tobacco and they fell in love with it, and they almost kept it to themselves for over 100 years. It was only in the 1600s when Sir Walter Raleigh went and found out and brought it back to Britain. But despite having almost over 100 years behind the race for the love of tobacco, in many ways, you could argue, you could make the point that in Britain, it became an even more treasured product in many ways. The way taxation at a very early stage, James I saying, hold on, in 1604, he said, you know what, that's going to be, I think it was something like 16 pence, shillings, and 10 pence to the pound, something like that per of tobacco. Already thinking of the taxation, which I'm sure is something we might talk about at some point, the uniqueness of the industry. But what I think it comes, I mean, there was a time where students in Eton College and all these famous universities and colleges, smoking tobacco was given in the mornings in the pipes as a recommended prescription in many ways. So I think the culture that was created, which in many ways was in the epitome of this in many ways, was Sir Winston Churchill, and being one of those that implemented cigar diplomacy and the element of cigars as part of the livelihood kind of encapsulated what Britain as a symbol till today means for many cigar smokers and people that come to visit, tourists that come to this golden mile of cigars, the passerella, the catwalk of the cigar walk on St. James's. You walk through it and there's something really unique. I haven't felt it. Perhaps in Geneva, I can feel to an extent a little bit like that sometimes, but I don't think to the scale or the way it feels in London. If you think of the number of lounges, you go to the Ritz, you go to the Wesley, you have these beautiful hotels and these beautiful sampling lounges. I mean, it's so hard to find a place. If you go back in time now, go back to Spain and try to find a great cigar lounge, easy as we can do in London today. There's no comparison. So I think that creates an ecosystem of people who are very knowledgeable, people with a very discerning palate. They have at their disposal a fairly good income to be able to try cigars that for other parts of the world will be completely prohibitive. You know, who would be paying hundreds of pounds for cigars, let alone when you go into the whole market of aged Cuban cigars of, you know, thousands and thousands of pounds that you see in the menus today when you go to many places in the UK. And there is almost as a culture of well refined gentlemen that dedicate their lives to creating a lifestyle, which it's not the cigar making element of it, but as a whole, as someone who loves the industry, I see it as an essential part because that's what consumers sometimes fall in love with. It's not at the beginning, the aging rooms, like the one behind us, or the cigar, or the fermentation, or all these elements that to me is the most beautiful part of it. But to many, the introduction to it is a well-spoken, knowledgeable, well-experienced cigar smoker in a beautiful lounge like James J. Fox, you know, the oldest one, arguably, trading at the same place in the world as a store, which is incredible. So I think there's a uniqueness to that culture, which is, again, a really good challenge because our cigars are, if any way, they're contending in some of the most scenarios with the most eyes looking at what happens here. And then that has a huge influence, which is something Britain has always had, you know, despite being, after stopping to be a huge empire, fairly small country, if you think geographically, the impact that it has in media, in music, in the arts, in technology is quite significant for a country that's relatively small, say if you compare geographically to countries even in my part of the world, Brazil, Argentina, and so on, or Mexico, right, or let alone the US. So indeed, it's a very special market, and we're really, really proud that we are in a great position and helping shift in many ways the trends that are happening in this market.
If I may dig just a little deeper there, I'm curious, how do you feel that? How do you perceive that on an individual level, not with the retail community, but with the end consumer, with the people who enjoy and appreciate fine handmade cigars at the end of the day? All that you mentioned about that shift happening from Cuban cigars to what you call New World cigars now. The culture, new cigar smokers at a younger age, maybe in their mid-30s, probably coming into the ecosystem now. What are the conversations that you're having with those end consumers? What's the feedback that you're getting from them?
It's a very good question. I can remember a few years ago now doing a cigar night with Mitchell Orchin, and he was sitting in his chair smoking his cigar, and he says, "What do you notice about tonight, Scott?" And I think we were smoking Alec Bradley cigars that evening. And I said, "Well, people are enjoying themselves." He said, "Yep." I said, "They're enjoying their cigars?" He went, "Yep." He said, "But what do you notice?" I said, "Well, what am I supposed to be noticing?" He says, "Look at the age of them. Look at the age of the people that are here tonight." And I would say the majority that night was between sort of 25 and under 40. And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, do you not find that unusual?" I said, "No, that's normal for when we host the cigar night." So of course, I hadn't thought he will host, or I've hosted evenings for Cuban in particular. And he would say the age profile was another 10, 15 years older when he hosted a cigar night. So I was like, okay, I didn't give it any thought, because to me, that was just normal, because I don't go to many Cuban cigar nights. We're too busy. So I think what we do is we talk to people, and I think I keep going back to this kind of Zoom years where people are educating themselves. And they say, you've got some good retailers in the UK, and I'm sorry to keep pointing the finger at Ray, but this guy does a weekly event with his clients in his store in Leeds, where he picks another cigar, and it's almost embarrassing to go to his store because he knows more about the cigar and the cigar maker than we do. So he's educating them. So what we try to do is educate people in a nice, light, polite, enjoyable way by telling the story and talking to people, just find out their experience. And we will get people who will come along, and again, it happens more in London perhaps than in other parts of the country, where people say, "Well, you know, I always smoke a Cohiba," you know? And to me, it's almost a bit like a badge collector. They feel that they have to smoke a Cohiba to go with the Aston Martin or the Lamborghini or whatever they've got in the drive. So I think our challenge is to get people to change their minds. And what we've done on several occasions is actually blind evenings where people don't know what they're smoking. And it's fascinating because they don't know what they're smoking. And we've had instances where people just will not believe the answers that we give them. So we were trying all sorts of different tricks and methods. Outside of London, people seem more open to listen, learn, ask questions, be really, really engaging. And I think most of the cigar nights we do face-to-face and on Zoom, we try to make interesting and fun. So they're not it's a chore to come to one of our nights. And I think that seems to be working. It's all, at the end of the day, our future is all about education. Simple as that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in addition to that, the other thing I'm noticing a lot in terms of the demographics, not only an age element, but also a gender element. So what you're seeing a little more, which is incredible and is very positive, and it gives us a lot of, opportunities ahead. If you think of the market of women more and more being part of these events, and not only the events, I mean, we pride ourselves in the number of trainings that we do in the store. So also the staff that you're seeing as sommeliers or regular staff at the store, you start to see more women. So that to me is brilliant. That's the kind of stuff that we want to see, that women feel more comfortable. At the end of the day, the more it gives us a huge opportunity as a market. So gender is big in terms of the shift that is happening very, very quickly. I've noticing that since I started joining events in 2016 with Scott, and I can already see the big difference that's happening. So not only in gender, but then I would say also racially speaking. So, I remember going to some of these events, and sometimes I'll be the one standing out because I'm the non East Western European white guy in the room or lady in the room. That's changing a lot. So you start seeing people from different backgrounds, cultural backgrounds, which again, the UK is such a diverse cultural country, particularly London, that I was, somewhat surprised at the very beginning, not seeing more of a reflection of the society in these events and at these activities. Now I'm seeing a little bit more of that, and you see a lot of Asians, and you see Asians in the sense the way they use it in the UK, which Asians is more so Pakistani, Indian, and so on, but also Asian in the way we would use it, or the people in the States would use it as Asians from China, Japan, and Southeast Asia. So both ways, you see a lot more of people from everywhere. That's wonderful to see. And one added element, I think, in terms of the demographic as well, is different income. So because of what cigars from Nicaragua, Honduras, Dominican, Mexico bring to the table, in addition to the fantastic quality, flawless construction, and actually getting to meet the cigar maker, not a state that owns the cigar brands, you also get to have access to products that are not as, it's still a luxury, but it's a little bit more affordable luxury. By the price of buying 4 or 5 cigars from this part of the world, you will buy 1 Cuban sometimes. So it allows more people to have an experience in that industry. So it's very positive to see that evolution as a consumer, but also as people coming into the industry. You also see younger people working at the retailer stores, at the hospitality venues. So all in all, the whole ecosystem is diversifying, I think, for the better.
Very interesting to hear those insights from the market, the demographics, and I think it's an observation that we all make internationally in various different countries, but particularly interesting to hear it from you in a very traditional cigar market like the United Kingdom. And it's I think it's very reassuring to hear, and it's reassuring that we are in a good space right now, that we're in a good place with a bright future ahead for premium handmade cigars, most certainly. We had a question from Ian, who is here with us. Ian, fire away, please. Thanks for joining us, as always.
Good evening again.
Thank you. And first of all, Scott, congratulations on 30 years, and I hope you have a successful another 30 years. Ricardo mentioned Eton College. I was reading a book recently, and I've actually got it up on my Kindle here. Apparently, in the 19th century, they had sort of the plague, and cigars were thought to keep the plague away. So apparently at Eton, the boys were flogged for not smoking cigars, which I think is a complete change from today. Obviously, we don't have corporal punishment anymore. Now, a couple of things.
They're all in Parliament now, Ian.
Sorry?
They're all in Parliament now.
Yeah. Lawrence Davis, who's at Sauter, has commented on Ricardo's film star looks.
Yep.
And I've noticed in a number of films recently, there's more smoking going on of cigarettes. Can we sort of encourage Hollywood to get cigar smoking, and perhaps Ricardo can have a cameo smoking cigars in a film? That's one point. And then, Scott, would you like to sort of just do a SWOT analysis, if it's not giving away trade secrets, about where you see strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats for your business in the future?
Oh, my goodness me. How long do you have? I've got one I prepared earlier in my briefcase. Yeah. Oh, geez, Ian, that's a hell of a question. Strengths. Well, I think our trade relationships, our manufacturer relationships, the brands that we have within our portfolio, the people in our business. Yeah, I bizarrely, we have our own brand, Sheraton. We have a good infrastructure. We've got a good warehouse. We've got great systems. We spent a lot of money on humidification, big, serious humidification. If you saw our machines, they are like red telephone boxes inside our humidor. Our weaknesses.
You don't have to concentrate too much on those.
Yeah, opportunity. We've still got opportunities. Certainly in London. London is still a big opportunity. In the last 12 months, we've moved more into hospitality, There's a gentleman in the room, John, up in the corner there, John Strange, joined us a year ago, almost to the day. So congratulations, John. John's an ex-restaurateur who loves cigars, so the two together. He spent the last 12 months opening up many hospitality outlets where, you know, previously you could buy a Cuban cigar and that was it, basically. So our opportunity is there. Our export business is growing, particularly on our pipe tobacco. As I say, we own the brand Sheraton. Sheraton pipes are an international, Dunhill Sheraton pipes are internationally renowned. We own the trademark for Sheraton tobacco, which I can talk about later, I'm sure. Oh my goodness me. We have great accessories, like with the Bovida distributor in the UK, and that's the developing category. We're now the Lotus distributor for Europe. So we're slowly opening up new markets around Europe for accessories for them. We still think there's room to build the Tor brand, UK and globally. There's the opportunity as well to get rid of the New World cigar concept, to move into regional concept. Now that we've spent 10 years telling people where the Nicaragua actually is and Honduras actually is, we're feeling more confident in the next few years that, you know what, these countries in the UK can stand up on their own 2 feet. So there's a lot of opportunities. I think the biggest one, probably more than anything, is education, Ian. We're starting our tours again for the retail trade in 2023, so that's lined up. We're working on various things to start putting together really smart and clever education processes which consumers, retailers will be able to go through to learn more, which will be more structured than what's been around at the moment. And our biggest threat really is legislation. We keep fighting it on a daily basis. We're very active on an industry committee called IPPAC, Imported Tobacco Products. We have track and trace coming in 2 years' time, which we are at the forefront with UK. We're all signed up and ready to go on that almost. We see that as it's coming, so we embrace it. There's no point fighting against it. We have to move with it. We're ready for that, as I say. So yeah, I'd say the biggest threat is probably legislation. We already work in one of the most draconian marketplaces in the world. We've won a lot of battles around packaging. We've won battles around, you know, having smoking lounges that are still, people can still go to sample. And we can still display cigars in shops. To our American friends who are on the call thinking this all sounds a bit weird, that's better than some countries. But that's just the industry we face and the issues we face. We lobby hard, we work hard to fight our corner. And of course, having somebody like a, you know, ex-politician to come in and join us, work that fight is fantastic, because he sees things through a different outlook to maybe us who are embedded in the industry for many years. So that's a very brief SWOT analysis. Okay.
Thank you. And I think that with Cuban cigars having put their prices up, I'm not going to pay £62 for a Cohiba Robusto. You know, it's now out of reach for me and probably for many people. I would rather have 3 New World cigars for the same price, and I think that's a big opportunity for you, because people are going to, you know, try something new. It's just crazy money now in London.
We're hearing that a lot, Ian, and obviously we're seeing retailers giving us more shelf space, which means we have to spend more time then with the retailer, educating them, obviously, on the cigars they're taking in. We don't just sell them a box of cigars and say, off you go. We pride ourselves on being able to educate the retail and the hospitality staff on being able to, provide the cigar to you so you know what you're getting, because often the consumer will know more than the retailer. So our challenge is to make sure the retailer knows more than the consumer. But we see that. I mean, over the last couple of years, our business has grown, but what we also have is record inventory in our warehouse. So we've planned very, very well, and we've built our stocks over the last 2 years. So when retailers do place an order, generally speaking, they get what they ask for. So we've been very careful with that. So rather than running off into the sunset with a big dividend, all the money has been reinvested back into the business to introduce people like Ricardo into the business, and also John, and also stock. So we're constantly reinvesting because we see the future, but there's no point having a great concept if we don't have stock to sell people.
Yeah. I hope you can get a Ferrari soon like Mitchell's got, so good luck with that.
I've got one on my mantelpiece.
Thank you very much, guys. Thank you.
No, thank you. One point, maybe just very short, wanted to highlight, and I want to make this as clear as possible, is that we have the greatest respect for Cuba as an industry, for Cuban cigars. We personally, I'm really against this, trying to put them as a one versus the other, or trying to put down the Cuban industry of cigars because of the challenges they are undergoing at the moment, economically, and in terms of quality, availability, and so on. It's a difficult time they're going through. And whilst it does gives us an opportunity, many retailers or hospitality businesses that would have never considered giving us forget the space, any openness whatsoever. The situation with the Cuban cigars that is very challenging at the moment has given us that opportunity. So we are grateful for that, but we do not in any way or form rejoice for what's happening there, because at the end of the day, the ones that are the most affected, it's not the Cohiba, it's not the state, are the people in the fields making those cigars and in the factory. So it's a very sad situation in many ways. And we wanted to, if some people want us to make it into a fight, you want to fight with Muhammad Ali at his best. You don't want to fight him when he's already retiring, when he's having issues. You want to compete with the best of the best at the best of their ability. The same way the Nicaraguan companies or Dominicans or Hondurans are competing against each other whilst being friendly and supporting each other as an element of competition. They're competing with each other at the best of their ability, making the best possible cigars that they can for consumers to make an educated choice into what they want. So in that sense, the Cuban situation does give us perhaps a little bit more time to keep growing. And if we're smart and we can move quickly and we can react. And also we have a lot to learn from them. We're kind of making the joke in the comments about how many times you have to smoke a badly constructed Cuban cigar to give it up. But you see, that speaks volume of their ability to storytelling and marketing and selling a story where, you get a few cigars that are not smoking to your taste in a box. Well, that's the artisanal element of it. And that's the mystique that they've created. And that, genuinely, I admire it. And if anything, I want to learn from that. And us Nicaraguans, we haven't been as efficient in the way of transmitting some of the richness that we have. And the same with Dominicans and Hondurans. So that's a huge opportunity. If we start to learn a lot from these lessons that they have gone through, and we are learning and we are applying and taking the best of it, why not? It's something that we must respect and admire and learn from.
Yeah. I wasn't knocking Cuban cigars. A good Cuban cigar is sublime. But as people have said, too many of them, it's not just the taste, but it's, they're plugged or they're not well constructed. I rarely get a Nicaraguan cigar that is not well made and which doesn't smoke well. So, but anyway, congratulations, and here's to another 30 years, Scott.
Thank you very much, Ian.
Thank you
Appreciate
so much,
that.
Ian. Much appreciated.
Ian, many thanks for the wonderful question, and gentlemen, thanks for the wonderful answers. And Ricardo, excellent point that you made there. In the most respectful way, and I think it's important to mention it, and thanks for bringing it up. I would love to throw in a quick question from our dear friends over at James Barber, joining us through the Facebook live stream. And their question was, are you planning on doing specific staff trainings for retailers in the future rather than events together with the end consumer? I believe you partially answered it previously, but I guess the very positive answer has to be yes, yes, right?
Yeah, the answer, James and Rosalie, thank you. They hosted a fantastic night for us on Friday night in Harrogate to celebrate our anniversary. How cool is that? So thank you, guys, for that. The answer to the question is yes. We've got staff training that we have ready now, but we're working on something for next year, which is pretty cool. It'll be groundbreaking. So yes is the answer in the short term. James, come with us to Nicaragua, which I know he is. Okay. And the answer to the third part is yes again. So it's all good.
Brilliant.
Indeed,
Yeah.
and it's happening a lot. I mean, I think it's just we're kind of doing it by region, but I was looking with John and what we have ahead. I think for the month of November, we must have at least 5 or 6 hospitality trainings line up, and we're working with Helen, which I think it's on the call as well. And again, she's one of our rock star superstars within our team. And I'm sure we're in the process of trying to, as we are looking at the next year, allocating time so we can do these trainings with every single retailer that we have. So every single one of them, we get a chance to spend some time and do training, not only product in terms of the sales process, which is essential, but also the product knowledge as deep as we can get. And as Scott is saying, without giving anything away, something exciting will be coming when it comes into an avenue that people will have, consumers and people that work in the industry, to learn about the cigars from our part of the world.
Bravo. I'm so grateful that the Light 'em Up community has so many wonderful people from the United Kingdom. Many of them joining us today here. Ray, who is now professionally involved in the industry as well. John from your team, who is a dear regular here and greatly appreciated what he does for the industry. Obviously, such a Ian with his wonderful questions every single week, but I guess such a UK heavy show wouldn't be complete without welcoming the one and only Nick Hammond, who has given such a tremendous value to the cigar industry through his tremendous work, and whose contribution cannot be treasured highly enough. So Nick, thanks for all of that, but in particular, thanks for joining us today as well. Greatly appreciated.
Good evening, Reinhard. Thank you so much. That's a lovely welcome, and thank you for the positive waves and claps in the background. It's always heartening to know that you're doing something right. It's lovely to be part of this. I wanted to be here for Scott and for Ricardo because I've long been a signed-up member of the Tor Appreciation Society, and this may be a small party political broadcast on behalf of that party, but I just wanted to say to you guys, really, that I wish, Scott, I could have shown you this video 10 years ago to show you where you would be, because I was with you that night when we sat in Cambridge with Mitchell Orchard. And I, by no means, have been with you every step of the way, but I've been with you a fair few of them. And I remember later that evening, we had a conversation where the bit of the Scottish Terrier came out in you, because there was a conversation about, could New World cigars ever compete? It wasn't even a question of could they take over, it was a question of could they ever compete in the market. I don't know if you remember, but Mitchell said it's never going to happen. And because of this XYZ about Cuban cigars, and you bridled. And I remember I saw you sitting there stewing, and then you sort of said, I think it will. And I believed that as well, which unusually for me, I was ahead of the game, because way back when I was a cigar geek, just sort of thinking about trying to be involved in the industry, I was listening to all, things called podcasts, which had just came out, and they were all from America. They weren't anything to do with cigars, was from America, and they were all talking about these brands that you now represent. They were talking about Drew Estate, and I think I helped introduce you to Jonathan Drew when you went to what was then ICPCR. And I remember you writing to me saying, do you know a guy called Juan Martinez? Because I'm going to go and meet him. And I said, yeah, I met him in Rotterdam. Yeah, he's a great guy. So we have been together sort of many steps of the way. And to see that change happen, organically has been a remarkable thing. And I would say, just like to offer my congratulations and say the same thing that I said with Ricardo the other night when we were back in Cambridge, funnily enough. That I think, your business is very much modelled on you in a nice way. Not everyone that works for you is short and bald. That's not what I meant.
We're working on it. Look at John.
but it's a business based on integrity, honesty, being upfront and doing the job that you say you're going to do, and based on friendship. And you've never said anything to me, anything meaningful to me that you have never delivered on. And I think that is part of the way you do business, and I think that's why you're successful. And it's nice to see that you let Ricardo into your linen cupboard there with all your cigars at your house. That's lovely.
This is our Sheraton aging room.
Yeah, well, you never know, Scott. You never know. But it's great to see you going from strength to strength, and I'm always I'm a big believer of you guys. And we've travelled that road together. We've visited all the major New World places together, and we've shared many happy times. And you work hard and you play hard, and we've done both together. What I wanted to ask really was, we've talked a lot. It's been a great evening, a very honest evening actually, of the way the world is. And another thing that I'd like to back up is that everybody always wants to paint this as a fight between Cuba and the rest of the world. And I know I've always felt very strongly that that's not the way to approach it, because that only leads to conflict, and there's plenty of that in the world at the moment, and we don't need any more. Any noise is good noise, and if people are smoking cigars, that is good for you. That's always been your motto, and I think that's very, very true. What I wanted to ask you was, the situation being what it is, whether it's due to Cuba shooting itself in the foot or to the unfortunate situations that they find themselves in, there is a massive opportunity for you and for New World manufacturers at the moment. I wanted to ask you, how do you think you maximise that opportunity? And perhaps from a manufacturer and your perspective, what would you see might be the what might be the pitfalls that you've got to try and avoid, because you are in a position now where that opportunity that you thought might never come, or you hoped it would come but you never really thought it would come this quickly, has suddenly arrived. And I know we talked a lot through lockdown and stuff, and we talked about being in a position to be able to run when everyone else was just starting to walk again, and we're here. So I'd be very interested to hear in loose terms about your planning and about how you feel things go forward from here, really.
Cool. That's a good question, Nick. Listen, thanks for the kind words, buddy, and that's really kind. We've travelled a lot together, and we've been everywhere together. So it's been a good journey with you, sir. Thank you. I guess it goes back to a little bit what I was saying to answer Ian's question. Is what we've tried to do over the last few years is, it became apparent very quickly the American market was booming, which means international markets were going to suffer with stock. So if you take the UK market, the whole volume for the UK is less than 1% of the American market, the whole market for the UK. So on the supply list from a manufacturer's perspective, we're not that important in the bigger scheme of things. We're important from a prestige perspective because people will want to have their cigars in the catwalk, London particularly. So we kind of speak to our manufacturers on a very, very, very regular basis. And the beauty of this kind of world we're in now is we can do a very quick Zoom call almost immediately and have access to Nicaragua or Dominican Republic or Mexico or whatever in an hour's time, kind of thing. So we quickly grasped that the American market was going to boom, and the manufacturers were starting to, they needed to supply the American market because that's what feeds them. So the international market were in danger of being not left behind, but they had to make decisions, as any businesses would have to make. Who are you going to do? You're going to look after the fish, fish where the fish are, or you're going to look at, sell a few cigars to Scott in the UK. So we made a decision very quickly to, as I say, invest in stock very, very quickly. We did a lot of support packages and help to the UK trade at the beginning of COVID, because we had no idea what the hell was going to happen, whether retailers not being able to open their doors and serving from trestle tables at their doors, and people couldn't go into humidors. So we explored different opportunities with retailers very, very quickly to help them get ahead. And unknown to us, the COVID world would start changing the industry anyway. So in a way, Nick, we went through supply issues probably in the first 6 months, because nobody was ready for the change and as quickly. But what we started to do was build stock very quickly, as fast as we could afford to, and fill that humidor and keep it full. So step one is making sure we can fulfill. We're not a distributor and importer if we can't fulfill orders. So as I say, our humidor at the moment is as full as it's ever been, ever in our history. Our inventory level was almost 40% up at the end of our financial year on the previous year.
Really?
So reinvesting in stock. But it's not just about the stock, it's about how we support the retailers. So we like to think that we help them as much as we can afford to help them, either through human resources, doing physical events, or in other ways. But we have to do that within a kind of managed way that we can afford to do it. And so far it seems to be working for us. We're not out of stock. We have runs on products.
Sure.
No, that's life. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. And we will build, but the best businesses, in my opinion, are ones that grow in a trend line rather than because you go too fast too quickly, you come down very, very fast.
Yeah.
So we do it in a very structured and planned way, and that seems to be working for us, Nick. And we've got stock, whereas there's some suppliers we're getting which other countries are perhaps not.
Really?
We keep those quiet on Instagram. So it's not maybe a satisfactory answer, my friend, but it's business is simple.
Yeah.
No, I think it shows people that the thought that goes behind what you do. It's not just about rocking up on a Wednesday night to an event and having a good time and hoping you sell a box or two. There's a hell of a lot that goes into it.
When people see us at events, somebody always says, "Oh, I'd love to work in the industry. I'd love to do what you do." This is the wee cherry on top of the cake.
Yeah.
When we do nights like this, or we do cigar events, and we meet people and we meet enthusiasts. Those are the moments that make the job worthwhile. During the day, we're like any other industry. We have to, we have shit from day to day, or we have something to deal with, or whatever. Or we get emails from a manufacturer saying, "Listen, one today. Hey, there's a price increase. It's effective from 9th of November." And I looked at the calendar and went, that's today.
Really?
So, shit happens, but, people don't see that. And at the end of the day, people see the nice bits, and that's nice because I want people to enjoy the nice bits.
Yeah.
Because the nice bits we all want. And we're really thankful that we actually have the opportunity to share the nice bits with people.
And if I may add, I have to say, it was the same in diplomacy, right? People think, "Oh, wow, diplomatic life, that must be just living the life, you're living the dream. There is a beauty to it, but what you see is just a very small fraction of what happens behind the scenes. And it's the same with the cigar industry. That cigar that led to that event in that special venue, the work behind it, it was just behind the scenes as, you know, laborers tinkering with a hammer and getting our way there.
Yeah.
But if I might just add a couple of things from my perspective, and the one thing I would say, you know, when you listen to a song in that first version becomes your favorite version of it. I have to say that to me, you are the voice of British cigars, because to me, who I started learning from, it wasn't some of these, you know, very all the famous writers and voices of the industry. It was your voice. It was your very humble, genuine, and charming voice through what you write, through what you write, to what you say, thoughtfully and respectfully, and the way you've actually taken the time to learn and research about my country, about the other cigar nations. That became my soundtrack to what the British voice of cigars is. And I always say that. I know you kind of get a little bit extra pink in your cheeks when I say it, but it is the truth. I think going back to the question, what I've seen sometimes, success and great success occasionally has a side effect that is getting complacent about your success. In many ways, people could argue that the great success of the Cuban industry, in many ways, could have made them a little bit complacent to an extent of a market that has so much love and so much blind admiration, no matter what. They were really hardcore lovers of that origin of cigars, that it almost became as a given. I feel, you know, as a consumer point of view, I feel that the level of effort that I've seen from importers on the New World cigar side of things, it was so much push and so much energy, because we were coming from zero. So we had to climb a huge wall. I'm not saying that everyone is complacent, but as an industry, felt a little bit like living on your laurels, on your victory. And it takes a bit of time to get shaken, to realize that you need to always be innovating in many ways. And that's something that we do. You know, Scott talks about all these core blocks that we need to have in place in order to be successful. But then in addition to that, there's an element of how can we be creative with what we have, with things that we can afford or try to afford, to bring something new, to bring some level of novelty into the industry in itself, and consumers get even more excited. How can we have that creativity? But I do have to say, things that I take away from that example that we're trying to be creative for, just to mention too, I think that you mentioned regional editions. Again, that's something that Cuba made a great tradition in their industry of creating very specific lines for specific countries, and giving that unique love that people love. I mean, the Brits and the English in particular, I suppose, love the EMS thing. They felt special. They were giving a cigar for them in a way. That's something that in New World cigar makers, to an extent that really hasn't been yet developed to the scale of the Cuban industry. That's something that we are seeing. That's something that is changing. And that's something that I can see as a new trend that we will see more of. And those are those unique British editions. It could be, I don't know, German editions and so on. They may happen more, but in Britain, it hasn't been as common for New Worlds. And the other thing I admire, and we've been trying to sort of get the best of it and create it our own way, again, is education. Because let's be frank, there's nothing like the Habano sommelier program up until now. I remember going to sommeliers in the UK with my little Nicaraguan pin when I was at the embassy, and trying to make a point. I will bring the Dominican ambassador or the Mexican ambassador with me and say, hey, do you have some cigars here for His Excellency or Her Excellency? They're like, never, no. And eventually, some of them would open up to me and say, Ricardo, look, here you come with all these cigars from your part of the world, and there's so many of them, and they're even more complex to an extent to get to know them, because you have different varietals from different parts of the world. It's not just one region making cigars from the 10 kilometers around it. You're talking about a very international construction in that cigar. And what is the pathway that you're giving me to become an expert in that cigar, aside from your conversation and your books? And we have great brochures and we have great elements of education, but nothing as complete, quite frankly, to something that gives you a title that says, I have the black belt of all Habano cigars. How do you get the black belt of New World cigars? And that's the kind of thing that we are learning, capturing, and trying to create in an iterated, better version, if possible.
Very, very interesting. Yeah, I mean that's really fascinating, because I think the regional edition is a great thought. You know, when I first got in contact with you, Scott, way back when, I think you were working with Tatuaje fairly recently. And, you know, I was looking at, you know, sneaking onto the internet and trying to find sites, and they were talking about, you know, his monster range and stuff at Halloween, and I'm thinking, this is so cool, and there was nothing, not even close to being anything like that. But now this is what we're talking about, and you know, this is how it takes 15 years to come through and filter through and reach a stage where we're able to say to Pete Johnston, you know, look, Pete, we need something special for the UK. You up for it? And he actually says, yeah, no, I see the reason behind that now. That's really exciting. And from the sommelier point of view, totally agree with you. I mean, you know, Cuba's done a great job with that. Hunters have done a great job with that. And those guys are fantastic cigar sommeliers, but they need another string to their bow. And I think to offer that to them, and the fact that you can have someone talk sensibly about Honduras and about Nicaragua and about Dominican Republic would be a massive boon to the industry as a whole. You know, might not be palatable to the Cuban side of things at first, but as I said right at the outshot, you know, all noise is good noise, and if people are smoking cigars, we've all got a future, haven't we?
Absolutely, Nick. And you know, when you've been to cigar nights with me, I always tell people to work a humidor. I never say just smoke Nicaraguan, never just smoke Mexico, just smoke, work a humidor. You'll find something you'll love. And, you know, I always hope in the back of my head it's one of ours, but ultimately I want people to explore different regions so they can start to experience the differences and the differences of the tobaccos. And, you know, it's the way forward. As Ricardo said earlier, ultimately we want all our cigars to be competing against each other, basically on a level playing field in terms of reputation.
Yeah.
And it's up to the consumer at the end of the day which one they will decide to purchase. And, you know, it's good times ahead. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you, boys. Much love to you, and hopefully see you at the next anniversary. And Reinhard, thank you for the opportunity, my friend.
Of course, Nick. Thank you from heart. Over to Brian in sunny California.
Hello. This is really enjoyable. Ricardo, you know I love your hair. Can you spare some for Scott? You could just share half of it, you know?
Well, I took mine off tonight, just so you'd know which one was which.
This is good timing. This kind of goes to the releases that you were talking about for like Just Britain and such. My first call here on the lounge, maybe 2.5 years ago, the first thing I said, this was my wife's advice. She's like, just apologize first off for being American, straight up. Just say sorry. So I'm going to steal this question actually from Reinhard's email. Sorry about the noise. Do you think that Europeans, and more specifically Brits, are more sophisticated, educated cigar smokers than Americans? And if you don't want to be controversial, what would you say are the differences between the two?
I'd say it's almost a different industry. I think cigars in the UK are very much a lifestyle choice. And the ability caused by we had a fantastic summer, but generally speaking, trying to find somewhere to smoke a cigar in the UK can be limited in some parts of the country. I guess like California, I guess. But I'd say the UK consumer, I don't know, they want to know a lot about the cigar. They want to know the filler, the binder, the wrapper, the aging. You know, is it being aged in barrel? Has it been aged, you know, how's it been aged? They want to know a lot of detail. They're also very interested in the manufacture as well, and the history of the manufacturer. And they're really interested to know about the countries So there seems to be a level. I don't know the American consumer that well. I see the American retailers when I come over to the IPCPR every year. They look very different, many of them, to European distributors and retailers in the way that they dress and act, I guess. But I don't know what the American consumer. The American shops I've been into, they'll walk in with a basket and they'll buy a bunch of cigars. If they did that in the UK, the bill at the desk would be about £1,000. Yeah. Whereas maybe in California it's expensive, but in Philadelphia, for example, the same cigars might cost $100 or $150. So it's harder here. So when people are spending more on a cigar, I think they want to know what they're buying. Whereas maybe in America, maybe it's a case of, tatuajes may be hot one week, or my father, or there's a new release from, Perdomo or whatever. They may just say, I'll grab one of these and I'll put it in my basket and I'll try it, at the weekend. Over here, it's a major purchase because it might be costing them £20 to £30 for that cigar, which is over, $30 to $40. So I think that's one of the subtle differences is you're having to spend more of your income. So you want to know what it is you're actually buying.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think there's a big element of that. Now, I also think there's an element of culture, very big here,
Yeah.
and I think the perhaps the substance knowledge is not that different in terms of the appetite for knowledge in the States and other countries. But I'll give you a silly example, but illustrates this, right? I get my son, who's grew up in the UK, and I get his cousins who grew up in the US, and they might tell you the exact same thing, one with a British accent and one with an American accent, with a US accent. And what the British people are saying, it sounds a lot more unique and more special. But quite frankly, they're pretty much saying the same thing, just in different terminology. Okay. In my opinion, I'm a neutral here. So I'm observing in terms of, I met people with a level of knowledge in the US that's completely blown my mind, and they smoke everything. Of course, the subject matter of expertise is within the New World cigar. So it's less of that Cuban mystique. There's less knowledge of the Cuban market. But if you get down to it, and they will know what the cigars, and they know about the cigar makers, and they smoke a lot more cigars than most of us, but it's just the way you express yourself. You get that gentleman from Geneva or from Austria to tell you about that cigar. It could be the same content, but if you present it with that European flair, it just sounds a lot more sophisticated, quite frankly. But if you go to the very basics and the bones to it, it's not that different in a way. Again, I try to spend as much time as I can. I go every year to the US and I go to the lounges. And indeed, the consumers, perhaps in terms of economic status, there's people from more diversity because they can afford cigars more in the US than you could in the UK. So you see a distinction into the way they dress. But that's also culturally. People in London, I wear a suit because I like wearing a suit, and that's the way in London it works around. I go to the lounges in the US where everybody's wearing sandals, and I still keep my suit, and it looks weird in a way, not to me, to them, but still, at the end of the day, the love, the passion, and the knowledge is more similar than dissimilar. I feel, at least in my very limited experience. Sometimes it's the style rather than the substance, but it's a big cultural difference.
Thank you. Yeah.
Let's
I
see
feel
what
very
Macy
lucky.
has to say about that.
Did I hear my name? Was that Mace or Macy? Which one we got?
Well, you're in the spotlight, so fire away. I was throwing you the curveball anyways.
Well, I can hit the curve. It's the cutter that gets. First of all, buenas noches, mucho gusto, señores. ¿Cómo están ustedes?
Buenas noches.
Mi hermano is Nicaraguense, ¿no? What's the demonym? It's Nicaraguense, no?
Nicaragüense, correct.
Nicaraguense, okay. First, a couple comments. My wife is from Colombia, and we have a family friend. I don't know if you ever knew Maggie from the diplomatic department there. And I've talked with her because one of my goals is to get diplomatic cigars. So I just got to ask real quick before are they real? I've heard Cuba has them. There's the legend of the Olla de Nicaragua, the numero uno. Can you confirm or deny whether a diplomatic exclusive, not for the plebeian cigars exist.
It existed, that is true. And the numero uno was that cigar. And anyone can testify that the Foreign Service would have a line of cigar made by Joya de Nicaragua that was the cigars that embassies across the UK, across the world, will give us as tokens of diplomatic gifts. You know, you always go to a meeting, to an embassy, you always go with a gift, be it Nicaraguan chocolate, be it Nicaraguan rum, be it Nicaraguan coffee, or Nicaraguan cigars. I think Juan was very astute in listening to some of the feedback that he received at some point and saying, Juan, that cigar is too good to be kept just for these diplomats. Everyone needs to enjoy this cigar. And I think that was a very smart move to open it to the rest of the world. But yeah, and I know for a fact the same. I have friends, ambassadors who used to be posted in Cuba, who are now posted here. One of the most recent ones, the Argentine ambassador, used to be in Havana, now he's based here. And he would get the special edition diplomatic Cohiba line that he would get. And we still trade cigars. I send him Nicaraguans, he gives me Cubans. So we have that kind of exchange. So from my experience, and in the case of Nicaragua, I can testify that indeed, yes. And there was a recognition of the value of cigars to help within the whole diplomatic relationships between nations, for sure.
¿Y usted a los ha fumado the número uno or no? You didn't have it yourself or? Many?
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's one of my very favorite cigars. I think it's a cigar that allows people to be able to, it's like a good diplomat. Most people can able to connect with it. Some people will love it, some people will love it less, but nobody's going to hate it. And ideally, that's the ability of a diplomat to be able to get the best and be able to connect with people. And that's a cigar that I personally love. But I'm still to find someone that looks at me and tells me what a bad cigar this is. Haven't come across that individual yet.
It's a great cigar, not as good as the Cinco Décadas, but it's pretty good. You know, I also just want to say that I really appreciate, as an American, and by the way, as an American, I want to apologize to the world for Brian Julian. We are sorry for him. We love you, Brian. But I had always wondered, I said, New World, I mean, it's all the New World. The tobacco is not from Europe or Asian. You know, I never understood in Europe why non-Cuban cigars are called New World. And you finally explained it to me. And I really understand now the efforts you've had to make in marketing to get what I might consider some stuffy Londoners to actually try something new. And so that a light bulb went off when you explained that, because that's always been, I'll be honest, it's always something that's kind of driven me crazy, is it's all New World. Columbus didn't go, like what, it's like my wife from Colombia, she gets a lot of Colombian, maybe Nicaragua's the same way. They get mad when United States, we call ourselves America. It's all America, North America, South America. And similarly, it's all the New World, but you explained that very well. And I didn't understand that before. So this might be the first time I say that. I sit here perhaps mistaken, but at least more educated. And that makes a lot of sense. But I encourage you, for what it's worth, I encourage you to take that next step because, and I don't like to dump on Cuba. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, first of all, we need to thank them for their genetics, but for the Cuban genetics, we wouldn't have the New World non-Cuban cigars. So thank you for the genetics. Thank you for the culture. Thank you for the techniques. Thank you for the people that you sent out into the world through strife so we can have these cigars. So I do not, I mean, but on the other hand, you've got to be honest. And communism's a terrible system. And I mean, Venezuela can't pump oil and Cuba can't make good cigars. That should tell you something about that system. And it breaks my heart what's going on there. And so, look, they could and should be making the best cigars in the world, and some of them are tremendous. But what hurts the industry is not us talking truthfully and respectfully about all things in the industry. What hurts the industry the most is when you make cigars that cost $50 a cigar and they're not good. That turns people off more than anything. I have a neighbor. He sold me his lot of cigars. It was great for me. I actually didn't want to buy his Cubans, bought all the other stuff, got some great Opus. And he says, look, it just cost too much. He says, I decided they just weren't worth the money. and we lost a cigar smoker there. So, and that's a guy who's really into it, and he had great stuff to sell. So, anyway, that's my 2 cents on that. I mean, it's not in the spirit of attacking Cuba. It's actually quite the opposite. I want to encourage them, but it is what it is. It's a state communist monopoly, and they're lucky they had these wonderful families that gave them those laurels to rest upon and the capitalist system to rest upon, because they've not built anything, the communists. They've not built a thing. They are only sucking out what others built and what they've stolen. And I do not support the embargo. But anyway, I also think the diplomatic roots in cigars is great. We can talk about Cohiba, Trinidad. That, we did talk a little. My question is this: as an American, I don't really understand. So, do you not? Is online retail not a big thing in the cigar business in the UK? I believe it's the present and certainly the future in the United States. I buy most of my cigars online. I love it. I could go in. I don't have a local shop that's very good. There are a whole bunch of reasons. The selection, my connoisseurship and ability to obtain cigar. The internet is, I love it, and it really bothers me when people trash on. It can be done in ways that are better or worse, but so could you talk a little bit about, because I don't know anything about that. Is online not a big thing in the UK, and if so, how is it not? Because it seems like, my God, that's just inevitable.
Online is big. I don't know fully the American market, but in the UK, I would say most bricks and mortar stores have also got an online presence. So I don't know if that's the same in America, but so the online industry is big in the UK. And it's continuing to grow, particularly in the last few years with COVID, when people couldn't travel. The online business got bigger and bigger and bigger. But as an industry, we need both. We need the bricks and mortar, because you need that experience of going to buy a cigar and having the service levels that the UK retailers will offer the consumer. And we also have the added benefit in the UK, where we've managed to secure some legislation whereby in most, if not all, cigar stores, you can actually sample a cigar in the shop. The shops are not the size of America. They're nowhere near it. But people can go there, purchase, and sit and smoke a cigar. If you ever go to Leeds in Yorkshire, you'll see that in Ray. He has a lounge. He's also got a cocktail bar, as well as a humidor area to purchase from. So that's becoming the common trend in the UK from from a footfall perspective. But the majority of the cigars are still sold online. So there is a growing. Sorry if it came across somewhere that it's not growing, but it's big in the UK.
Indeed. And I think, again, thank you for the previous comments in terms of that. I'm delighted that you understand now a bit more the reasoning behind a New World cigar. And, I used to work quite closely with my colleagues at the Embassy of Colombia here. And one thing we used to do, I was president 2 years in a row for the Latin American Trade and Investment Association. And the way we used to work, we used to come together as a region. So because there was so much competition here from other regions that wanted that source of investment, perhaps from the financial system of the UK. So you have the Asians, and then you have the Africans. So all of us Latin Americans and the Colombians will know that our strategy was we come united. We are Latin America as a whole. That's the first introduction. Also, we are a huge market, and we have these many people, and we have these many opportunities. So in unity as a region, there is a power. We're better as a fist than each one of the fingers in that hand. And that was the approach that we had and we still have when we say Latin America. Then once people go passing that barrier of what Latin American is actually a great part of the world, and it is not only a scary part of the world, and they open their minds to it, that's when they get to know a little bit each one of the individual elements of Latin America. So that's the same when it comes into using the umbrella We used to have the Latin American umbrella, which in itself is a really difficult term to define. People will ask me, how many countries? Do you include the Caribbean or not? So it's never a right or wrong answer when it comes into what is Latin America as a whole. But at the same way, having an umbrella that puts us all together to people to then eventually learn each individual, which is where we're going. As Scott said before, we envision a time when, whilst we love the New World, what it has done, the New World cigar terminology, I'm looking forward to a time where non-Cuban is gone completely, and that people are referring to the cigars to where they're made, and that's period, right? It's Nicaragua, it's Honduras, and I find myself trying to do that. But it's true with the whole American thing. I gave up that battle a long time ago. Growing up, I will always correct people and say, hold on. America is a continent, it's not a country. I cannot give up that battle just because in my home, I never give it up. And I always say the US. You rarely ever would catch me saying America when I'm not referring to the whole continent, which is the right thing, more specifically, right? And yeah, and the last bit, I would say, look, regimes, I think it's to their own people to decide. It's not up to me to criticize a regime I don't live in. So whether communism is good or bad, I think that's up to the people that live in that regime to have a more informed opinion into how they live it. It's not up to me to bash or celebrate capitalism or communism or socialism. That's to each people their own way. That's my opinion, at least, that people will find their way. We did it in Nicaragua, and people will always do that, I think.
Amen.
Well, thank you. And Adam Smith was a Scot, I believe.
There you go. So yeah, everything goes back
And
to
David
Scotland.
Hume, the most underrated Scot of all time. Real quick, is David Hume, the philosopher.
Everything you're using tonight started in Scotland. The phone, the roads home tonight, the whiskey you're going to drink, the water, maybe even everything comes from Scotland. Okay, all the good things.
Even cigars. No, not cigars.
I'll put on my finest tweed as well.
Thank you very much. Great intervention.
Scott, Ricardo, the chat is filling up with cocktail orders here for Ray's open bar, and I'm sure you probably have a delightful bottle of champagne somewhere on ice already to continue the celebration tonight and continue the party around your anniversary. We want to be respectful of your time, obviously, and it's incredible. 2 hours flew, and what a delightful conversation. But before we wrap things up, I think it's only appropriate for tonight's show to have Mace in Great Britain asking the final question for tonight. Mace, brother, you're one of our trusted, loyal regulars and friends and family here at the Light 'em Up Lounge. And you're also, I think you're the essence of Light 'em Up, connecting worlds, bringing together the best of so many different parts of the world, heritages and origins, and so I'd be very happy to hear your comment and your question as the last one for tonight.
Many thanks, Reinhard, and another great evening. And Scott, Ricardo, and John over there as well. To see John's being very quiet, but massive congratulations on 30 years. Here's to hopefully another 30 years to come. So great seeing you all. Great seeing the Light 'em Up family. So it's just it's an interesting question that I had, and I'm almost pulling from Ian's question, from Richard's question, in terms of just where you see the future. And it's kind of a question around the aspects of your industry where you've got, as an importer, you've got the consumer on one end, you've got the retailer on the other, and then you've got the manufacturers. We know what the legislation is like. I think, legislation is a big issue globally, from the US to Europe to the UK. We don't even dive into that one. It's a massive pain in the ass, but there we go. I wanted to just get your feelings on, if you had to pick the biggest challenge in terms of growth over the next 1, 2, 5 years, out of the retailers, consumers, and manufacturers, where do you kind of see the biggest challenge? And it's then also, so how do you envisage being able to deal with each one of those? If you had to pick one key element out of those 3 areas, as a business to sort of grow, where's the biggest challenge, and how do you think you can sort of overcome that?
Good question.
Yeah,
Very good question.
I mean, I can share a little bit, I suppose.
Yeah, you go first on this one.
Started.
Yeah.
One of the challenges that is completely outside of our control in many ways, at least direct control, to be able to influence directly, putting aside legislation. Like we said, legislation is that sword on top of our heads that at any point we need to find a good shield, and it's always there, and we have to find ways. But one of the things that happens in our developing nations, where most of the cigars are made, one of the biggest challenges is the human capital that's there. And if you talk with many of our cigar makers, what is their biggest challenge? And ultimately, if you have to go back to the source. Without cigars, there's the whole chain ends in a way. Same, you could say the same with the consumers. Without the consumers, there wouldn't be reason to be making cigars to an extent. But one of the biggest challenges comes into the human capital in our nations, and the challenges that come with being a developing nation with economic constraints and difficult, perhaps government setups, and all those challenges that it creates in a society. And that sometimes transition and it reflects in people emigrating from that country. And you take, for instance, a case, I can speak about my country, and I would say, you know, you go to Esteli, the city that makes most premium cigars than any other city in the world. The one city in Latin America that has zero unemployment. I think probably the only one in Latin America where you actually have zero unemployment and you have to bring people from other places. But the biggest challenge that our cigars makers have, quite frankly, is ability to get enough people to keep training them, educating them, and giving them the great social impact that they generate in terms of local health, education, safety, well-being, and giving them the conditions to thrive and continue making the cigars and being able to supply the demand in the volumes that is required. So that is a huge, huge challenge that is a very complex one, because again, humans were very complex, and immigrations are a very complex situation across the world. We see it here in the UK, and the implications I have for the way the countries run to an extent, and the way the countries perceive their policy on immigration has a great reflection of the status quo of the people running the country. So that to us, and the only thing I can think of, I mean, what we do, and Scott touched upon this at the beginning, is what we do in our selection process of who we want to work with. Those are the companies that we feel give the biggest social impact to their own cigar making nations. That to an extent. But then I will also say the people that we work on the retail side as well. Sometimes we forget that it's not just about the cigar making nations. The importing nations get a great benefit in creating an economic engine. All the retailers and everybody involved, people having a place to go and socialize. So if you take that away from society and having less people being able to enjoy this and work in this, has a terrible impact to the society in the nations where the cigars come to. You see it in the US, you see it here. So to me, it's the human aspect. It comes back to the people. And that to me is the biggest challenge. And at this extent, what we can do again is be very discerning in who we want to work with. Be as generous as we can, where there's any possibility to do any charity support and to have any programs that have an impact in housing, in education, in health, both in the producing nation and also in the importing nations. Those are the sort of initiatives and opportunities that we have to try to make a little bit of an impact into something that, again, to an extent, is such a big thing that we couldn't dedicate ourselves to change it. We'll have to be in a different business altogether to have a serious impact, but we'll do what we can. But that, Mace, is one of the things that does worry, because it's my own people, right? And people put their lives at risk to emigrate to another country thinking they're going to live the dream. And they get to that country and the dream is not like the one in the movies. It's a very different situation. I lived in that dream to an extent, so I can tell as well how it's not that shiny once you're actually inside of it. But yeah, that's my 2 cents, at least when it comes into the challenge.
I'll turn your question around and say, what does the future look like? Is, I don't know about other countries. There is a government policy that they want to make the UK a smoke-free country in 2030. What that actually means in real terms is that 5% of the adult population will still be smokers. And within that, sadly, we get caught within that 5%. I think the way the industry will evolve with the advent of things like vaping and nicotine pouches and all that kind of stuff is that the industry will end up where it started. That the smoking habit will end up where it started, with cigars and pipes. And as long as we can keep our percentage of, as it is today, as the cigarette and the roll your own, which is what the governments are after, declines, the cigar and the pipe tobacco industry will remain strong. So my kind of long-term view on this is we'll go back to where it all started with cigar shops, with selling pipe tobacco, and cigarettes and other stuff like roll your own will disappear off the shelves in time. So from that perspective, that's why I gave up my corporate life to chase the dream, because I can see the future will go back to where it started. We'll see.
Well, I'm glad you gave up that life and joined this one, making a keep up the good fight. So thanks for that.
So am I. Thank you very much. Thank you.
so much,
And
guys.
Scott, this is a very, very interesting perspective that, to be honest, I have very rarely heard in all the conversations and discussions around cigar regulation and the issues that we're facing as an industry. But what a wonderful and positive thought to take away from this as well, besides all the other things that you mentioned. But I think it's a thought worthwhile pursuing and thoroughly remembering and keeping in mind that this could be a positive direction that we're headed into. Greatly appreciated.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Gentlemen, Scott, Ricardo, I'm beyond grateful and blessed and honored to have shared this wonderful evening with you. It's fantastic to bring a company in front of the curtain into the spotlight that usually is more of a behind the scenes player. And you gentlemen, Scott and Ricardo, you both have done tremendous things for this industry that we all love and appreciate, and for other industries. It is greatly appreciated. It has to be applauded, and hopefully we, with Light 'em Up, could make a small contribution as well to cherish and champion different parts of the industry, different players of the industry. Some of them usually in the spotlight, like the manufacturers, the master blenders, the growers, the brand owners. But it needs all of the elements of the entire chain. It needs all of the people who give their blood, sweat, and tears and their time and effort into building this. And you do so tremendously well, with finesse, with elegance, with style, humility, and that means a lot to me. So I'm truly grateful to have spent this evening with you, celebrating your success and celebrating your 30 years in business in the most successful way. And I feel that the best is ahead of all of us. And I wish you tremendous success for the next 30 years and way beyond that.
Thank you very much indeed, Reinhard. And thanks everyone for coming out tonight and giving up your Wednesday evening. Apologise for it going on so long, but the fact you've all stayed with us means you've enjoyed it. We have.
Yes, definitely. It's
Most certainly.
it means a lot to us, and you're tremendously generous in what you said. I think we're just here being servants of an industry that deserves having servants giving their best to their ability to do what we can. And we got smacked to see so many people around here and other ones, from all over the world, cigar maker, we have brand owners, we have consumers, we have everywhere,
Came
from
to the
everywhere
corner as well.
Yeah, so we have such a great variety, and to all of you, thank you so much for showing and taking the time to come here and support us and support this from Italy in the south, through Austria, through everywhere. Scotland. We're tremendously grateful. It means a lot to us. You took the time to this, and to you, Reinhard, again, congratulations. Thank you. Please keep it up. We need you. The industry needs you. And we need all of you. So thank you so much. Muchas gracias.
Brilliant.
From heart.
Thank you very much. Have a safe evening, everyone. Thank you.
Very same to you. And we'll see you again here next week with another great show. Until then, light 'em up. And thanks to all of you for being here with us today. Goodbye and good night, everybody.
Thank
Great
you.
show.
Bye.
Great show,
Thank
guys.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Love you, boys. See you later.
Cheers, Nick.
Yeah.